He called her too ugly for his level after she built him from nothing. But when she returned on the arm of a billionaire, his world shattered in public. From betrayal to jaw-dropping revenge, this story proves karma doesn't knock. It arrives in high heels. If you believe in poetic justice, like, comment, and subscribe for more shocking stories. Before the first rooster crowed and before the sky softened from black to gray, Odera was already awake. Her alarm was not a clock, but hunger, the kind that did not just gnaw at the stomach, but pressed against the future like a ticking bomb. If she did not sell, she did not eat. If she did not eat, she could not trade tomorrow. In the faint glow of a kerosene lamp, she tied her wrapper tightly around her waist, splashed cold water on her face, and stepped into the quiet street, carrying 2 heavy baskets balanced expertly on her head and hip. By the time she reached the market, the air smelled of damp earth and yesterday's refuse. Stray dogs rummaged through discarded leaves. A few early traders nodded at her, the silent fraternity of women who fought poverty before sunrise. Odera's stall sat at the edge of the main path, nothing more than a wooden table patched with nails and hope. She laid out her goods with practiced care. Fresh tomatoes arranged in small pyramids, peppers glowing red and green, onions piled like little suns, sacks of rice tied neatly, bundles of dried fish releasing their sharp, salty scent. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she worked, but she hummed softly, an old song her mother used to sing while cooking. It was a small, stubborn happiness. When customers began to arrive, she greeted each one warmly. "Good morning, Mama." "Welcome, my sister. God will bless your pocket today." Her smile was genuine, never forced. People returned to her stall not just for her fair prices, but for the feeling that, in a harsh world, someone still saw them as human. That was why she noticed him. He stood at a distance at first, half hidden behind a pillar, watching the food with a hunger so raw it made her chest tighten. His clothes hung loosely on his thin frame, stained and wrinkled beyond repair. His cheeks were hollow, his lips dry and cracked. But it was his eyes that caught her, bright, alert, ashamed. He lingered there for a long time, pretending to look elsewhere whenever someone glanced his way. Odera knew that look. It was the look of someone calculating whether begging would cost more dignity than starvation. She picked up a small nylon bag, filled it with leftover rice and stew from her own meal, added 2 pieces of fried plantain, and walked toward him. "Brother," she said gently, holding it out. He froze. "For me?" he asked, voice hoarse. She nodded. Food should not be begging. His hands trembled as he took the bag. For a second, it seemed he might cry. Instead, he turned away and ate quickly, like someone afraid the food might disappear. When he finished, he came back and bowed slightly. "Thank you," he said. "My name is Kunle." "Odera," she replied with a smile. That was how it began. The next day, he returned, thinner, quieter, but hopeful. She fed him again. By the 3rd day, she asked, "Where are you staying?" He hesitated. "Nowhere." Something inside her broke. That evening, as she closed her stall, she gestured for him to follow. They walked through narrow streets to a small compound where children played barefoot in dusty sand and women cooked over charcoal stoves. Her room was tiny, barely large enough for a narrow bed, a plastic table, a single chair, and a small gas burner. The paint peeled from the walls. A cracked mirror hung crookedly near the door. "You can sleep there," she said, pointing to a folded mat in the corner. Kunlay stared at her as if she had handed him a palace. "I won't cause trouble," he said quickly. "I know," she replied. That night, she listened to him breathing softly in the darkness, the sound oddly comforting. For the first time in years, she did not feel completely alone. Soon, Kunle became part of her daily life. He woke early to help carry her goods to the market. He lifted heavy bags, fetched water, chased away thieves, and ran errands without complaint. Customers began to recognize him as Odera's boy. She bought him second-hand clothes from the market, 2 shirts, 1 pair of trousers, rubber sandals. When she handed them to him, he held them carefully as though they were made of gold. Weeks turned into months. Kunle gained weight. Color returned to his face. His laughter came easily now, bright and youthful. He proved intelligent, quick to learn, eager to improve. One afternoon, he watched a man pay with a bank transfer instead of cash. "How did he do that?" Kunle asked, eyes wide. Odera explained mobile banking as best she could. From that day, he began talking constantly about business, money, and opportunity. His dreams spilled out like water from a cracked pot. "I don't want to carry loads forever," he said. "I want to own something, a shop, a company." Odera listened, nodding, encouraging. When she heard about a vocational training program for aspiring entrepreneurs, she used nearly all her savings to enroll him. He protested weakly at first. "This money is too much," he said. She waved it off. "It's an investment." "In what?" "In you." The program changed everything. Kunle learned about sourcing goods, pricing, marketing, negotiation. He absorbed knowledge like dry soil drinking rain. Soon, he started a tiny electronics stall selling phone chargers, earphones, and batteries. At first, sales were slow, but he was persistent, persuasive, ambitious. Within months, his business grew. He reinvested profits, expanded his inventory, and eventually moved into a small shop of his own. Odera celebrated him more than he celebrated himself. She cooked special meals, prayed for his success, boasted about him to customers as if he were her own child. But success is a mirror. It shows a person who they truly are. 2 years after that first meal, Kunle no longer resembled the starving boy she had rescued. He wore tailored shirts and polished shoes. A sleek wristwatch gleamed on his arm. His hair was cut weekly at expensive salons. He carried himself with the confident swagger of a man who believed he had conquered the world. He moved out of her tiny room into a modern apartment. "I need space to grow," he explained. She understood, or at least she tried to. At first, he still visited often, then weekly, then rarely. When he did come, his eyes wandered around her room as if seeing it for the first time. The peeling paint, the old furniture, the cramped space. His conversations changed too. He spoke English more, Yoruba less. He mentioned wealthy friends, upscale restaurants, business deals. Sometimes he checked his phone while she talked, nodding absent-mindedly. One evening, she reached for his hand across the table. He withdrew it subtly, pretending to adjust his sleeve. The gesture was small, almost invisible, but it felt like a door quietly closing. As he left that night, Odera stood in the doorway watching his retreating back, tall, confident, distant. A strange unease settled in her chest. She did not yet know it, but the boy she had saved was disappearing. And in his place stood a man who was beginning to forget the woman who built him. Sunday evenings used to be sacred. It was the one day Kunle almost always visited. The one day Odera allowed herself to hope, to imagine a future that stretched beyond survival. She woke that morning with a quiet excitement fluttering in her chest, the kind she hadn't felt in weeks. She scrubbed her tiny room until her fingers ached. She shook out the curtains, wiped down every surface, rearranged the plastic flowers on the table 3 times before deciding they looked decent enough. She even borrowed a neighbor's standing fan to make the room cooler. Then she went to the market, not to sell, but to buy. Chicken was expensive now. So was rice. Tomatoes had nearly doubled in price. But she bought them anyway, counting crumpled notes from a cloth purse tied securely inside her blouse. "It's been a long time since he ate my food," she told herself. "He'll be happy." Back home, she cooked slowly, carefully, pouring love into every step. The jollof rice simmered rich and fragrant, the pepper and spices filling the room with warmth. She fried plantains until their edges caramelized golden brown. The chicken sizzled in hot oil, releasing a mouth-watering aroma that drifted into the corridor. For dessert, she even bought a small bottle of malt, his favorite when he couldn't afford beer. By evening, the table looked like a celebration. Then she turned her attention to herself. From a nylon bag hidden under her bed, she brought out her best Ankara dress, deep blue with gold patterns, slightly faded but still elegant. She ironed it carefully, pressing out every stubborn crease. She rubbed a little body oil onto her skin to give it a soft glow. Her freshly braided hair was pulled back neatly, small gold earrings glinting in her ears. When she looked in the cracked mirror, she felt shy, like a bride seeing herself for the first time. Maybe, she thought, tonight he would say something about their future. Maybe he had been distant because he was planning something big. Maybe. A knock came at the door. Her heart leapt. She opened it with a smile already blooming. Kunle stood there, tall, handsome, impeccably dressed in a crisp white shirt and dark trousers. His shoes gleamed. His cologne filled the air with an expensive, unfamiliar scent. But his expression was wrong. No smile, no warmth, just a tight, uncomfortable look as if he would rather be anywhere else. "Odera," he said, stepping inside. She moved aside quickly. "You're welcome. Sit. I cooked for you." He glanced at the table briefly, then looked away. "Thanks." No excitement, no teasing comment, no appreciative laugh. Something cold slid into her stomach. They sat across from each other. She served him generously, hands trembling slightly. He took a few mechanical bites, chewed, swallowed, set the spoon down. "Odera, we need to talk." The words landed heavily in the small room, sucking the warmth from the air. Her fingers tightened around her own spoon. "Is everything okay?" she asked softly. He exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair as though preparing for a business negotiation. "I've been thinking for a while," he began, "and I've realized something." Her pulse roared in her ears. "I've outgrown this relationship." The room tilted. "I'm sorry, what?" "I've outgrown it," he repeated flatly. "You're not my type anymore." She blinked, certain she had misheard. "Your type?" He rubbed his forehead, irritation creeping into his voice. "Look, Odera, don't make this difficult." Her throat tightened painfully. "What do you mean I'm not your type?" He sighed. A long, exaggerated sigh, like a teacher losing patience with a slow student. "Look at successful men," he said. "Look at the women they're with. Models, fair, sophisticated, classy." His gaze swept over her, from her face to her dress to her hands roughened by years of work. You still look like a market woman." The words did not just hurt. They detonated. She felt them in her chest, her stomach, her bones, each syllable a hammer striking something fragile inside her. I am a market woman," she said weakly. "That's exactly the problem." Silence swallowed the room. Outside, children laughed somewhere down the corridor. A generator roared to life in the distance. Life went on, oblivious to the quiet devastation unfolding inside those four walls. "I supported you when you had nothing," she whispered finally, her voice trembling like glass about to shatter. Kunle's expression hardened. "And I appreciate it," he said. "I really do. But that doesn't mean I owe you my future." Tears blurred her vision. She wiped them quickly, ashamed to cry in front of him. "I didn't help you because I wanted payment," she said. "I helped you because I loved you." He looked uncomfortable now, shifting in his chair. "Love is not enough," he replied. "Not at my level." My level. The phrase echoed cruelly in her mind. "So, what happens to us?" she asked, though part of her already knew. He stood up. "I think it's best we go our separate ways." The finality in his tone slammed the door on any remaining hope. She stared at him, searching desperately for the boy she had fed, sheltered, believed in. He was gone. In his place stood a stranger wearing Kunle's face. "Is there someone else?" she asked, barely audible. He hesitated, just long enough to answer the question without speaking. "That's not the point," he said at last. But it was. He moved toward the door. "Take care of yourself, Odera." Then he left, just like that. No hug, no apology, no backward glance. The door clicked shut with a soft, ordinary sound that felt louder than thunder. For a long time, she did not move. The food on the table cooled. Oil congealed on the surface of the stew. Flies began to gather, buzzing lazily. Still she sat there, staring at the empty chair across from her. Finally, a small sound escaped her throat, half sob, half gasp, as if her body could no longer contain the pain. Then the flood came. She slid from the chair to the floor, clutching her chest as though something inside it were tearing apart. Her cries were not graceful, not quiet. They were raw, animal sounds ripped from somewhere deep and broken. She cried until her throat burned, until her head throbbed, until exhaustion dragged her into a restless, tear-soaked sleep on the cold cement floor. Days passed. She did not open her stall. Neighbors knocked, calling her name. She did not answer. At night, they heard muffled sobs through the thin walls. Then, 2 weeks later, the final blow arrived. A young girl in the compound burst into her room without knocking, phone in hand. "Auntie Odera, have you seen this?" On the screen were photos, bright, glamorous, impossible to ignore. Kunle in an expensive suit, smiling broadly. Beside him stood a stunning, light-skinned woman in a glittering gown, her hair cascading like silk, her makeup flawless. In the next photo, he knelt before her, holding up a sparkling diamond ring. Roses covered the floor. Champagne glasses shimmered under golden lights. People clapped and cheered in the background. The caption read, "She said, yes." Odera's hands began to shake. The phone slipped from her grasp and hit the floor with a dull crack. Something inside her collapsed completely, not just her heart, but the foundation of who she believed she was. All the sacrifices, all the love, all the years, reduced to one brutal conclusion. She had never been enough. That night, her cries echoed through the compound again, softer this time, hoarse and hollow, like the sound of something already broken being crushed further. By morning, her eyes were swollen beyond recognition, and in the cracked mirror staring back at her, she did not see the warm, hopeful woman who had built a man from nothing. She saw only what his words had left behind. Someone small, someone unwanted, someone ugly. A year later, the woman who walked through the market looked like a stranger wearing Odera's face. Not because her skin had changed, it was still the same deep, luminous ebony. Not because her features were different, her broad nose, full lips, and rounded cheeks were untouched. But something fundamental had shifted, something invisible yet unmistakable. She moved differently, as if she no longer apologized for existing. The transformation had not happened overnight. It had not come from creams or salons or magic. It had begun in the darkest months after Kunle left, when the pain had hollowed her out so completely that she could no longer recognize herself. For weeks after his engagement announcement, she drifted through life like a ghost. She ate little, slept poorly, avoided people, even the market, once her sanctuary, felt unbearable. Every laughing couple, every well-dressed woman, every mention of weddings or success pierced her like a needle. But survival has a stubborn pulse. Eventually, hunger forced her back to her stall. The first day she returned, whispers followed her like smoke. "Isn't that the one he dumped?" "Poor thing. They say he's marrying a very fine girl." She kept her head down and worked. Tomatoes, peppers, rice, fish, one sale at a time. At night, she cried. In the morning, she traded. Slowly, painfully, she began stitching her life back together, not because she felt strong, but because she had no choice. Months passed. Then came the day everything changed. It was market day, the busiest of the week. The air pulsed with noise, traders shouting prices, buyers haggling fiercely, buses honking, generators rumbling, music blaring from portable speakers. Odera was bent over her stall, sorting onions, when she noticed the man. He stood out immediately, not because of flashy clothes, but because of the opposite. He wore a simple native outfit, clean but understated. No jewelry, no entourage. Yet there was an air about him, a quiet gravity that made people unconsciously step aside. He seemed slightly disoriented, scanning the chaotic market as if mapping unfamiliar terrain. Before she could think much of it, two boys slipped through the crowd toward him. Quick, silent, practiced. One bumped his shoulder. The other's hand darted toward the inside pocket of his outfit. Odera reacted before she even realized she had moved. "Thief! Thief!" she shouted, her voice slicing through the noise like a blade. The boys bolted instantly, disappearing into the maze of bodies. The man checked his pocket, startled. "My wallet," he said, breath catching. "They almost—" "You're lucky," Odera replied, stepping closer. "Those boys are professionals." He looked at her then, really looked, and something in his expression shifted. Not pity, not superiority, interest. "Thank you," he said slowly. "What is your name?" "Odera." "I am Chike," he replied. They spoke only briefly before customers pulled her attention away. She assumed that would be the end of it. It wasn't. He returned the next day, and the next. Sometimes he bought things he clearly did not need. Sometimes he simply stood nearby, watching the rhythm of the market with curious fascination. Their conversations grew longer. He asked about her business, her suppliers, her challenges, her profits. Not in a condescending way, but with genuine curiosity, as if her experiences were valuable data, not trivial stories. For the first time in a long while, Odera felt seen. One afternoon, as she described the difficulties of transporting goods from rural farms, he listened intently, then asked, "If you had capital, what would you change first?" She blinked, surprised. No one had ever asked her that. "I would control supply," she said slowly. "Buy directly from farmers, store properly, sell wholesale. Prices would be lower, profit higher." He nodded thoughtfully, as if filing the idea away. Weeks later, he returned, this time with documents. "I would like to invest in your idea," he said calmly. She stared at him, certain she had misunderstood. "Invest?" "Yes, you have the knowledge. You lack the resources." That was the day she learned his full identity. Chief Odogwu Chike, industrialist, philanthropist, one of the wealthiest men in the region. The revelation left her dizzy. "Why me?" she asked. He met her gaze steadily. "Because you did not try to impress me. You tried to help me. Because you built something from nothing. Because you think like a leader." No one had ever described her that way before. The investment changed her life. Within months, her single stall expanded into a supply store, then another, then contracts with farmers, warehouses, delivery vans, employees who called her Madam with genuine respect. But Odogwu's support went beyond money. He introduced her to business mentors who taught her strategy and negotiation. He arranged professional training, etiquette, public speaking, financial management. He encouraged her to exercise not for appearance, but for health. A skincare consultant helped her repair years of sun damage. A stylist showed her how to dress in ways that honored her body rather than hiding it. At first, she felt like an imposter in that new world, awkward, uncertain, constantly afraid of making mistakes. But slowly, confidence replaced fear. Her back straightened. Her voice grew steadier. Her laughter returned, fuller, freer than before. She discovered she did not need to become someone else to be remarkable. She only needed permission to be fully herself. The physical changes followed naturally. Her skin glowed with vitality, not chemicals. Her natural hair, once hidden under scarves, was now styled into elegant shapes that framed her face beautifully. Her clothes were tailored, flattering, powerful, without being ostentatious. When she walked into a room, heads turned, not because she demanded attention, but because she radiated presence. The greatest change, however, was internal. She no longer looked at herself through Kunle's cruel words. She looked through her own eyes, through Odogwu's eyes, through the eyes of employees who depended on her, farmers who respected her, customers who admired her. One evening, after a successful business event, Odogwu drove her home himself. The city lights reflected softly on the windshield, casting warm glows across his composed face. "You have surpassed even my expectations," he said quietly. She smiled. "You gave me the opportunity." "I only opened the door," he replied. "You walked through it." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then he turned toward her fully. "Odera," he said, his voice deeper now, more personal. "I admire you, not just as a business partner, as a woman." Her breath caught. "I would like to court you, properly, respectfully. No grand gestures, no dramatic speeches, just sincerity." And for the first time since her heartbreak, she felt something bloom inside her that did not hurt. Their relationship unfolded gently, built on conversation, trust, and mutual respect. He never rushed her, never pressured her. He treated her not as someone to rescue, but as an equal. Months later, during a quiet dinner at a private garden restaurant, he reached into his pocket and produced a small velvet box. He did not kneel dramatically. He simply held her hand, his thumb brushing her knuckles with surprising tenderness. "Odera," he said softly, "you are the most extraordinary woman I have ever known. Will you honor me by becoming my wife?" Tears filled her eyes, not from pain this time, but from something far more powerful, healing. "Yes," she whispered. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, she realized something profound. Kunle had not destroyed her. He had stripped away illusions. And in the space left behind, she had discovered a version of herself far stronger, wiser, and more radiant than she had ever imagined. This was not revenge. This was rebirth. Success had lifted Kunle fast. Failure dragged him down faster. At first, everything with Aisha had felt like proof that he had arrived. She was beautiful in the exact way he had dreamed, light-skinned, glamorous, The kind of woman who turned heads the moment she entered a room. Being seen with her made him feel important, validated, superior. But beauty, he soon discovered, had a price tag. Designer bags that cost more than his monthly profits. Shoes he was afraid to ask about. Weekly salon appointments, spa days, luxury dinners, spontaneous trips just to unwind. She spoke casually about money, as if it replenished itself. "Babe, this is nothing," she would say with a dismissive wave whenever he hesitated. At first, he paid gladly. Then he paid nervously. Then he paid desperately. His business began to suffer. He missed meetings, diverted funds, took risky loans to maintain the lifestyle she demanded. Suppliers complained. Customers drifted away. Employees quit when salaries came late. Investors, once eager to associate with his rising brand, quietly withdrew. But Aisha did not slow down. If anything, her demands escalated. "You can't expect me to live like a poor person," she snapped one night when he suggested cutting expenses. "Do you know who I am?" The question lingered in the air long after she stormed out of the room. Kunle did not know, and increasingly he realized she did not care who he was either, as long as the money flowed. By the time the debts became impossible to hide, it was already too late. One morning, he woke to an unfamiliar silence. No music from her phone, no sound of running water, no perfume lingering in the air. The wardrobe door hung open. Half her clothes were gone. Her jewelry box empty. His laptop missing. He grabbed his phone with trembling hands and dialed her number. Switched off. A cold dread crept into his chest. He checked his bank account. Balance nearly zero. Savings wiped out. Credit lines maxed. She had taken everything she could access and disappeared. Within weeks, creditors began calling relentlessly. Legal notices arrived. His landlord threatened eviction. Former business partners refused to answer his messages. The same world that had celebrated him now pretended he did not exist. Kunle shrank. His tailored suits were replaced by worn shirts, his polished shoes by cheap sandals, his confident stride by a hesitant shuffle. Worst of all was the silence of his apartment, once filled with laughter, music, and illusion. Now it echoed with regret. At night, memories crept in uninvited. Odera's cooking, Odera's laughter, Odera's unwavering belief in him. He began to replay the night he left her, hearing his own cruel words with fresh horror. "You still look like a market woman?" Shame burned through him like acid. Months passed. He took odd jobs to survive, avoiding places where someone might recognize him. Pride had evaporated, replaced by a dull, constant ache. Then, one humid afternoon, fate brought him to a luxury mall, not as a shopper, but as a delivery assistant helping unload goods from a van. As he wiped sweat from his brow, a sleek black SUV glided to a stop near the entrance. The door opened, and she stepped out. At first, his mind refused to process what his eyes were seeing. The woman moved with effortless grace, one hand lightly touching the car door as if the world itself were steadying her. A fitted cream dress hugged her curves, elegant without being revealing. Diamond studs caught the sunlight with sharp flashes. Her natural hair was styled into a sophisticated crown that framed her glowing face. Her skin, deep, radiant, luminous, looked like polished mahogany under the afternoon sun. She looked powerful, untouchable, regal. His heart slammed violently against his ribs. Odera? No, it couldn't be. But it was. Recognition struck like lightning, leaving him breathless. Without thinking, he dropped the box he was carrying and stumbled toward her, pushing past startled pedestrians. "Odera!" She turned, Their eyes met. For a split second, surprise flickered across her face, quickly replaced by calm composure. He stopped a few steps away, suddenly aware of his disheveled appearance, his sweat-soaked shirt, the dust clinging to his trousers. "Odera, please, His voice broke. Emotion surged up his throat, raw and unstoppable. "I made a mistake." People nearby slowed, sensing drama. Phones began to appear discreetly. "I was stupid," he continued, tears spilling freely now. "Blind. I didn't see your value. You were always the one who loved me, the one who stood by me." He sank to his knees on the polished pavement, uncaring of the stares, the whispers, the humiliation. "Please," he choked, "take me back. We can start over. I swear I'll treat you right this time." Silence fell, heavy, expectant. Odera did not move. She looked down at him, her expression unreadable. Not angry, not triumphant, not even cruel, just distant, as if she were observing something that no longer had power over her. Then a deep voice cut through the stillness. "That won't be happening." Kunle froze. A large hand settled gently but possessively on Odera's waist. Chief Odogwu stepped forward. Up close, his presence was overwhelming. Tall, broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed in a dark suit that seemed to absorb the light. His gaze was calm but unyielding, like a mountain that did not need to prove its strength. "This woman," he said evenly, "is my fiancée." Kunle's mouth fell open. His eyes darted between them, comprehension dawning slowly, painfully. Odogwu's expression hardened slightly. "Do you know what you threw away?" he asked. Kunle lowered his head, unable to meet his eyes. "A loyal woman who built you when you were nothing. A woman who believed in you when no one else did. A woman with more character than all your shallow fantasies combined." Each word struck with surgical precision. Kunle's shoulders began to shake. I know," he whispered. "I know." Odera finally spoke. Her voice was soft, steady, impossibly kind for someone addressing the man who had once shattered her. "I loved you when you had nothing," she said. "I gave you everything I could." He looked up at her, hope flickering weakly. "You rejected me when you had everything," she continued gently. "Not because I hurt you, not because I betrayed you, but because I wasn't beautiful enough for your new life." The hope died. "Now," she said, her eyes clear and peaceful, "I have something more valuable than love." He swallowed hard. "What?" "Peace." The word landed heavier than any insult. "And I won't trade it for pain," she finished. She extended her hand backward without looking. Odogwu took it immediately, his grip warm, secure, unquestioning. Together they turned and walked toward the mall entrance. No dramatic exit, no triumphant laughter, no backward glance, just quiet certainty. Kunle remained on his knees, watching them disappear into the building, two figures moving in perfect harmony, belonging to a world he had once touched and then lost through his own choices. Around him, life resumed. People murmured. Some shook their heads. Others snapped photos. Security guards exchanged knowing looks. But Kunle heard none of it. He stared at the empty space where she had stood, the weight of realization pressing down until it was almost impossible to breathe. He had not lost her to another man. He had lost her to his own blindness, to his pride, to the cruel lie that beauty determined worth. Now, stripped of wealth, status, and illusion, he finally understood what she had been all along. Not ugly, not ordinary, extraordinary. But understanding, he discovered too late, does not undo consequences. As he slowly pushed himself to his feet, legs trembling, one truth settled into his bones with merciless clarity. Some doors close quietly, and no amount of regret can force them open again.